you mentioned that when the soul chooses its birth,
Yeah.
that it sees a light and it sort of takes birth according to that light that it sees. And the light signifies what the soul needs to learn during the course of that life. And after thinking about that, that sort of implied to me that I saw a problem there with the idea of free will and how all of our lives might be planned very rigidly. Could you go into sort of relationship with that, with the idea of choice
Yeah.
within our life?
Yes. The truth of the matter is, Humberto has come. Both free will and determinism are simultaneously operating. Determinism is the divine will. There is a divine will as to what is to happen ultimately, where each individual has to arrive, what he has to fulfill, what aspect of the divine truth he has to manifest, where the universe has got to come. This is the large frame of will, determinism. But within that, there is a great freedom and scope for free will. It is determined that one day my inner being, my soul, will realize the divine consciousness and either merge or radiate that consciousness. That is, I become one in consciousness with the divine one day, some period of time. Time is not fixed. It is left to me whether I will meander, waste lot of time and leisurely go there, or I will take steps, determine my path and arrive there quickly. So this world, universe, is a field of possibilities, not actualities determined somewhere. Out of this clash of possibilities, certain probabilities emerge, and they ultimately result in actualizing the higher will, the divine will. So each one of us has a large amount of freedom and to function. I was mentioning the other day in some other place how there is a serious discussion among scientists today. They speak, first they spoke of 3 dimensions, then they spoke of time as the 4th dimension. Today they are wondering whether the freedom for me to choose whether I will put my step on the right side or on the left side, my next step, whether it will be on this side or this side, that I have got freedom. Whether that is not the 5th dimension. That, they say, constitutes the 5th dimension. Possible, but it is a fact. Mother used to speak of 12 dimensions. That 12. And she said each one has to realize it by experience, otherwise it is unthinkable. The mind cannot formulate those dimensions. But this sense of freedom, actual scope that I have, that is real. and that gives zest to life.
So this life the soul sees then as possibilities that it can actualize?
It is indicated to it by the higher powers that that's the place which is suited to you, where you should go. But when it comes, Mother describes it how it comes headlong. Some adverse entities or forces can deflect, or it may itself not see that. It may just go headlong wherever it falls.
How rare is one of these predetermined places they must go to, or how much can they become aware of that?
As you develop in your consciousness, as your awareness grows, as you cease to live on the surface and open up the deeper levels of your existence, that knowledge, that perception gradually comes to the front. It is a question of becoming more and more conscious. And when your consciousness develops, enlarges, deepens, then there is that revelation. What's my path? What's my goal? How do I get about it? Also, the moment there is that flash, many of our mental ideas, subconscious, unconscious, they interfere with it. They color it. And we may be, misled. So for that, we must have purity of consciousness, unmixed with motivations of desire, ego and the like. So that means one has to live spiritual life. I don't mean religious life. Religious life is different, moral life is different, social life is different, spiritual life is different. Moral life, Sri Aurobindo, since this comes properly in our discussion, he speaks first of physical life. The primitive man is mostly centered around physical desires, physical creature comforts, physical senses. This was the first stage in the development of humanity. But don't you think that the primitive man is a thing of the past? In every one of us, somewhere there is that primitive man. So Aurobindo says, scratch the surface of a modern civilized man and you will find the aboriginal somewhere. So that part in us, which is always hankering after physical dimensions, that is the primitive. So a life which is largely cast in the physical mode is the physical man, physical life. After that is settled and organized, there is the surge of vitality, life force. It pushes man outside of his physical location, dominate, aggrandize, conquer. So we have the vital man, vital life, led by the vital man. So then after comes the mental life. The mind awakes, it takes joy in things of the mind, ideas, concepts, thinkings. So the physical life, vital life, mental life, they correspond to the three gunas, the modes of nature: tamas, inertia; rajas, kinesis; sattva, balance, enlightenment. Now after you have reached the mental stage, you begin to come out of your individual shell. You participate in social life, society. There is a social life distinct from your individual life. And in the course of that, they erect certain ideals, standards, norms, which they call ethical standards. They are intended to humanize the human being, de-animalize, de-brutalize the creature. And persons implicitly follow these ethical standards. It has been said that we follow. And that is the moral life or the ethical life, where you follow certain scriptural standards, whether they are applicable today or not, but they are there and you follow, and you have a certain satisfaction that you are very virtuous, and it also builds up what is called a moral ego. Then there is religious life, where we are taught that there is God, that there is a reality. It is possible to commune with that, to pray for His grace, to pray for grace, to pray for help, rituals, formulas. If we have no time, if we can't do, there is a class of priests who will do it for us. And we just follow the outside rituals, worship and things like that, read the scriptures. Now all that need not at all influence our consciousness. These are all external things which are meant to domesticate us. So a religious life is more or less concerned with outer forms, outer conformity, rituals, dogma, belief. And religions as they have developed, they divide. They keep people of one religion away from another religion. They limit our vision and we become fanatical. But spiritual life is something else. Spiritual life is largely psychological. It may have a physical basis. It may have a religious beginning. It may have a moral coating. But essentially, it is an effort of the individual to awake to one's greater reality, to discover oneself that one is not a creature of circumstances, outer possibilities, but there is something inner. So one enlarges, deepens, opens up the hidden or corridors of the being and links oneself with that reality. It can be linked within oneself, it can be linked outside in the universe, it can be linked with the reality transcending the universe. And the various paths of discipline which teach us how to discipline ourselves, how to open this new dimension in ourselves, hook ourselves to that truth. They are all spiritual disciplines. You may call them psychological ways or yoga or whatever it is. Sri Aurobindo calls yoga as practical psychology. Psychology in this teaching of Sri Aurobindo and Mother is not just a science of the mind. It is a science of consciousness. And consciousness is not confined to the mind. The mind is a specific formulation of consciousness, just as life energy is a formulation of the force of consciousness. The movements and activities that are covered by the mind are only a small selection of the various activities are possible for consciousness. When we go beyond the mind or enlarge our mind, we begin to become aware of the various areas of the workings of this consciousness in different ways of knowledge, ways of contact, ways of living. So yogic psychology is something large and different from psychology as it has been understood in academic circles, where they study the mind only from the yogic point of view, again the very superficies of the mind. Now, how do you enter into the spiritual life? What is spiritual life and how do we open that dimension in our lives? Sri Aurobindo says in his 4 aids, the first chapter of the synthesis of yoga, that there are 4 factors that in their conjoint operation build up the spiritual life. First is knowledge. Second is effort. Third, the teacher or the guide. Fourth, time. Before we set out on any project, we should know the processes, the principles, the goal, the implications of what we are launching upon. And this knowledge of what things are, what things have got to be, what we need to do, what are the ways and processes of effecting this change, this is the knowledge that is required. And he says that this knowledge is there in the heart of every creature, every person, folded up like a lotus. It is there. It has only to be evoked. You cannot teach anybody what is not already there in that person. All our effort is to draw out, to stimulate that inner knowledge to unveil itself. It is there in principle, not in its organized manner, but in the seed form. And it begins to open, it begins to unveil itself once you have taken a decision in which your whole being cooperates to turn towards the divine reality. Once you have felt that this ordinary existence no longer satisfies me, that I must enter into my deeper reality, realize my true being, you have made the decision. And nobody can think of this, nobody can take this decision unless that decision has been taken for that person high up. It is because the divine thinks of us that we at all think of the divine instead of all these obvious things. In our rounds of evolution, we arrive at a point when we have reached that sufficient soul maturity to turn towards the divine. That's the point of turning. And it is an act of grace, it is an act of divine choice that you choose the divine. Sri Aurobindo says, he who chooses the infinite has been chosen by the infinite. Thereafter, every experience, every contact, everything that happens only serves to stimulate this inner knowledge to unfold itself. We may not be aware, we may not be that pointed to know that, but everything in life acquires a meaning, acquires a significance once you decide, I want the divine and nothing else. Everything takes a new complexion. Usually, This inner awakening needs a word, capital W, needs a word to awaken that hidden knowledge. And that word comes to a few rare ones from within itself. The divine teacher, the world teacher who is within, he gives the key word, or one receives that word in dream or in a state of concentration, and it opens up things. So a revealed word from within acts as a key to open the hidden knowledge. But this happens only in the case of a few rare beings. To quite a large number, it is a scripture which is a record of spiritual revelation or experience of the past. It breathes a different atmosphere, and when one studies the scripture, it lights up something and releases the pent-up knowledge within. This scripture, which is there in all religions, it has a charge. But it is possible that such a scripture gets out of date. Each scripture, he points out, has two elements. One element that is purely local, temporal, which may have historical meaning for us, as for instance in the Bible, in the Quran, there are many things which reflect the customs and the traditions and the habits, the economic conditions, the social institutions of those days. They have no relevance to us. These are what are called temporal or local elements. But there are also eternal, perennial truths in the scripture. When we study, we should have the discrimination to separate the local from the perennial, and we must concentrate our attention on the certain fundamental truths, the perennial truths, leaving aside as incidental things which are not pertinent to our times. That means we cannot take every word of it as applying to us, every word as something to be observed. This is a feature of every scripture. Now these scriptures have come for thousands of years, and for many they may not be enough to ignite the flame inside. And these scriptures become stale. So you have later teachings. Anybody else who has a spiritual experience which he can communicate to you? No. and he systematizes his knowledge. That becomes a guide. In other words, scriptures have a place, but where scriptures do not apply, you have to have current relevant teachings to guide you. So it is a divine and a providential arrangement that all the while somebody, through some instrument or other, the necessary requisite knowledge is given to awaken your own inner knowledge. What is important, Sri Aurobindo observes, is that we should keep our mind open. Never imprison yourself in any scripture, saying that my scripture, my religion, my thing is superior to everybody. No. What is relevant to me may not be relevant to another. So you have to use the scripture, but always you have to be above. You cannot afford to be imprisoned in the mold of a past or present scripture. It is a very important part of Sri Aurobindo's teaching that no teaching can be final. Even his own teaching for his own disciples, he said, this is not the ultimate. This is what is relevant to you at this time. Maybe in another cycle a further teaching will come. And this is so because new truths are constantly coming into being. Ours is not a finished creation. Ours is a developing universe with new elements coming into it all the while. Material level, life level, mind level, spiritual level. New ingressions are constantly coming up. So knowledge has to keep pace. Knowledge has always to expand, admit new truths, new possibilities. I was just reading this evening some diary record of mother's conversations, and there she says how the content of the subtle atmosphere of the earth has increased so much that nobody could imagine. She says 100 years ago and today, if you see what has increased in the subtle atmosphere, subtle region of the earth, it is something tremendous. Every experience, here or elsewhere, everything leaves a sediment. New truths relevant to our development of consciousness come into being. And it is a constantly progressing and enlarging and increasing proposition. So it is childish to swear by my scripture or by my book which helps me. I have always to conceive the possibility that truth can find other expressions. There are other aspects. So, says the practitioner of integral yoga, of this integral perfection of life, can use a scripture but can never be limited by scripture. Your experience is more immediate, more important than what somebody else says of what is right or what is wrong. In religious matters, yes, scripture. In spiritual matters, your experience. So, this is knowledge. There are treatises which teachers, masters have written or classified of the processes of disciplines, like Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, aphorisms on yoga, or Narada's aphorisms on bhakti, devotion, and so on. In every religion, in every culture, there are these systematized treatises giving you step by step how to proceed. But when we study them, we must see how to apply them in our case. We don't have to follow dicto everything that is said step by step in the manner it is said. You have to take account of the principles, of the guiding truths behind these processes. Now, with this large, pliant, flexible, mental approach, study, understanding, you are ready to proceed to the next step, to study the next requirement, and that is practice. There are many learned people, very profound writings, lectures, knowledge, but it makes no difference to them in their personal lives. A man who writes great essays about nobility, heroism, he may be a coward and he may be a very mean man in life. Now, when you turn to spiritual life, what you know, you have to live. It is not enough to do, but you have to be that. There is a striking saying of Mother. She says, to know is good. To do is better. To be is best. So what we read, what we study, what our knowledge tells us, that we have to render into practice. Many times we mentally know what is right, but our desires, our preferences, they don't allow us to do that. We will say next time. This time we will do, this is better for me to do. This is what Aurobindo calls insincerity. His definition of sincerity is something very remarkable. He says, sincerity is to lift up all the moments of your life to the level of your ideal, or to the level of the highest consciousness you have attained. That is Mother's definition. You cherish a truth. You want to make it real in your life. Then every occasion in your life, you have to remember that and you have to be faithful to it. There are no exceptions. It is only by practicing, by fixing it in your conduct, that the truth becomes natural. So, whatever we read from Shastra or Scripture, knowledge, it has to be turned into practice. Our life has to be shaped in that mold. It is an old world myth of separating this life and that life, spiritual life and worldly life. That I will do what I want according to the worldly standards when I operate in the world, but as between God and me, I have a different way. That will not work in spiritual life. It may work in religious life, but not in spiritual life. Spiritual life does not admit of compartments, does not permit the division between secular life and spiritual life. All life is one. The spiritual attitude, the spiritual knowledge, the spiritual aspiration has got to be expressed and organized in external material life. It is only then that we see how every circumstance in our outer life comes to help us in our growth. It becomes a challenge, it becomes a test, but designed to push you in the path. Mother says that for a seeker, the circumstances in which one finds oneself are the best designed to promote the person's evolution. And once you take it so, indeed it turns out to be so. So every difficulty, every obstruction has to be taken in the right spirit. It is offered to bring out some inner strength, to test my sincerity, and I have to utilize it for that purpose. So, whether outer life or inner life, it is of one unit. Outer life, what we do, it affects the inner movement, and the inner gains cannot be stabilized unless they are organized and worked in the circumstances of the outer life. And Sri Aurobindo speaks of three broad movements in the personal effort. He holds up the ideal of the biblical phrase, "My zeal for thee, O Lord, has eaten me up." That should be the impetus, the commitment, that nothing else matters. We have a great saint in India, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. He was the guru of Vivekananda. A very simple man, unlettered, but he would always speak of the highest wisdom. And when somebody asked him once how to know that I am ready for spiritual life, he said, you take out a fish from the water, put it on the banks, and see how it struggles to get back into the water. When you begin to struggle and suffocate inside for the divine, and you feel you cannot exist without the divine, just as the fish feels it can't exist without water, then you are ready. That must be your psychological state, an inner thirst, an inner hunger, a sense that you cannot do without it. Nobody has it in the beginning, but by aspiration, by dedication, by commitment, one develops that flame. So the first movement is to ignite this aspiration and open all the parts of oneself to the grace, to the divine response, because the response is always waiting for us to call. If the human takes one step, the divine takes 2 steps forward. And this constant aspiring, seeking and keeping oneself open to the response, to what flows from high on, that is the first step. Second, what comes, you have to imbibe, you have to absorb. You have to willingly understand, absorb it and integrate it with everything in your body, in your system. So, ascent of consciousness, ascent of your whole being and descent of the higher consciousness. You call, and when there is a descent of consciousness, maybe of peace, maybe of joy, maybe of light, maybe of knowledge, whatever, you gratefully receive it and integrate it in yourself. But not all of us always aspires. At many times it is some central part in us that aspires. In some it is the mind, in some it is the heart, but other parts do not cooperate. Not after 15 minutes. Sri Aurobindo describes this difficulty in his epic Savitri. He says, our nether members tire of peace. They want drama, they want excitement, and they get bored when there is too much of peace. So we have to educate our less advanced parts, look into corners where light has not reached and expose them to the light that comes from above. Also, we must know that this constant dichotomy or inability of part of our being or the bulk of our being to keep pace with the forward parts results in certain difficulties. They may express themselves as physical illness or mental tension, mental struggle. As long as there is this harmonization is not there, there is difficulty. So he says, always aspire, ascend and receive the descent and integrate it. And the third moment is to express it in life. The gains of the spirit, whatever gains you make, are not intended to be bottled up in yourself. Nature has not evolved you after millenniums of years just so that you can kick off nature and disappear into the spirit. You have to become the bridge between nature and God. The consciousness of the human is the place where earth and heaven will join, science and spirituality will fuse, nature and God combine. And it is very important that every step of progress made during meditations, prayers, contemplation, every step, every gain that is made is reflected in the external life. It is only thus that it becomes fixed. Otherwise, it remains an accomplishment at some level. These are the first two factors, knowledge and practice, what we call in Sanskrit sadhana. Sadhana is a sustained endeavor to practice an ideal, to actualize a chosen ideal. I think we will break for a while. In one of my talks about the epic Savitri, written by Sri Aurobindo over a period of 50 years, and it is a kind of a spiritual autobiography of himself and the mother, and it is also his testament to humanity. There is yoga, there is religion, there is spiritual practice, there is philosophy, there is vision. The different provinces of thought and experience are depicted in verse. I thought I should mention that as from today, Wednesday nights, we are commencing a study of some portions of this epic at 8:30 at night at the place where I am staying at the moment, 62 Dorland Street, and any of you who are interested are welcome to join. It will be once a week, Wednesdays at 8:30. After this, 62 Dorland Street. It is between the 17th and the 18th Street. Dolores. Yes. Yes. Yes.
No, it's the flat.
So just number
It's
6.
the number 62 and downstairs is 64.
As soon as you turn into the street, third building or fourth building to the left, opposite a school. To resume our discussion, any questions from what we have talked so far? Yeah.
You talked about physical life, social life, mental life,
Yeah.
and spiritual life. Did you say something about moral life
Yes.
and its possible role in spiritual life or in religious life?
Moral life, as we saw, is a life led in conformity to certain standards and rules laid down in scriptures or by conventions in any society. Certain things are come in scripture, certain things conventions, and we follow them because they are to be done. They are always meant to control unregenerate nature in us and establish a certain balance in our nature. To that extent, it has a very helpful role to play, both in culture and civilization, as also in spiritual life. Because no spiritual life is possible as long as one is subject to nature. By nature I mean impulsions of desires, passions, egoism, selfishness and things. Moral rules and things say that you shall not hurt others, you shall not deceive others, you shall not cheat others, you should control your desires, you shall not tell falsehood. Now all these, they restrain the animal impulses in us, the downward movements, and affect a certain purification and conduct which are necessary for the development of consciousness Godward. So you will find that in any spiritual person all the standards of morality are fulfilled. But a perfectly moral man need not be spiritual. He will observe things. There are many atheists, there are many agnostics who don't believe in God, who don't believe in consciousness, but they say these are the right things to be done. I shall not hurt my neighbor, it is a social requirement. I shall not cheat. Now these they observe, and this they have got what is called a moral righteousness, and they are satisfied and they stay. And at times it goes to the extent of finding fault with others who don't observe it. They are called Pharisees, always feeling superior to others, that I am perfect moral man and these are sinners. They do this wrong, that wrong, they look down. Now that is unspiritual. So a moral man can be unspiritual in some ways, particularly when he indulges in that egoism, moral ego. A moral ego is more dangerous than normal ego, where you feel you are important, you are, whatever you say must be done. That is normal ego. But a moral ego is where you feel distinct, superior, you have nothing more to do, you are satisfied with yourself, what leads to self-complacency. You are very virtuous, others are vicious. So this you will find in lot of people who observe externally all these requirements. But it has a purificatory role in spiritual life. Now the first condition we spoke, first factor was knowledge, next was practice, the third is a teacher. How do we know that what we have read or understood of the teaching is, scripture is right? How do I know that what I practice is the right thing to be done? So it is always insisted that you must have somebody who inspires you, who guides, from whom you can derive guidance, whose influence helps you, and that person is called a teacher. Now a teacher, as the real knowledge is within, the real teacher is always within each being. Deep in us there is a presence, a divine presence, and that's the teacher. It always guides. It tells, if you only listen to its voice, what is right and what is not. It warns. It encourages. So in each one, there is the divine teacher, what is called the world teacher. But it's only a few who can awake to that presence, who can commune with that presence. Almost all need an external figure, an external presence, and tradition provides it in what we the concept of God. God is a person, and almost all religions put before the human consciousness this figure of God, who is the perfect, the absolute, the ideal. And the human being always needs an external focus. So one worships, one adores, one prays to, one communes with, and establishes a living relation with the particular form of God that appeals to one. In the Hindu tradition, for instance, we don't have just one God. There are a number of gods, and each God represents a particular movement of consciousness. God Shiva is there, symbolizing peace, purity, non-attachment. God Krishna is there, symbolizing, concretizing joy of life, dance of life, universality, conqueror of the falsehood, establisher of the right. He is Krishna. Similarly, Rama is there, who establishes a balance, conquering animal impulses, enlisting on his side the energies of the mind, symbolized by the monkeys. He establishes the kingdom of right, the ideal kingdom. There is Vishnu, the preserver, who believes in prosperity, in wealth, who believes in the reality of this world, who sustains it. There is the Divine Mother in any form, who sustains, who cherishes, who brings up. So we have a large number of forms of gods, and each one chooses what strikes a ring inside. That form with which one feels an affinity, one chooses. In other religions, there is different type of formulation, but an external figure. But even these may not be dynamic enough for everybody. You may say they are imaginations. They don't inspire me. Then we have divinity taking human form. They are incarnations. At particular junctures in the history of evolution, the divine descends on earth in human form to establish certain truths and principles, to open up some ways of evolution, and they are called the avatars or incarnations. Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, these are some of the avatars who have exercised a tremendous influence on humanity, who mark milestones in the development of human consciousness Godward, and they inspire millions and millions of people across the years. But even these incarnations, they come once, say in 1,000 years or 10,000 millenniums. They also get stale. So we have provision for more frequent exemplars, radiant personalities who are called the prophets. There is Moses, there is Muhammad, there are others. They don't call themselves avatars or incarnations, but they are messengers of God. They say that they have received the communication and the command and they transmit it to you. They are prophets. But even these prophets come once in a while. So there is provision for the human teacher. Possible, an avatar may be my teacher, a prophet may be my teacher, or I may need a living teacher. And that is what is called the guru in India, a teacher or a guide who has already realized the truth that you are seeking. He is not merely a learned man. He need not be a learned man. But the line which you are pursuing, the truth that you are seeking to realize, he has realized. He, or when I mean he, it is she, and he, it's same. That guru has realized. And he is the teacher. And this teacher, Sri Aurobindo, makes it very clear. He communicates not only through precept, but through his influence and example. What he has experienced, what he has realized, true, he formulates in terms of a philosophy, in terms of a teaching. But that's not everything. He is an influence, known and unknown to him. All the while, vibrations issue from his being. Vibrations issue from his writings, from his utterances, and they go and impact upon those who are ready. They make those who are not ready, they make them ready, those who are intended for that path. It is a continuous charge that goes like a vibratory impact on everyone in the surroundings, or even 10,000 miles away. You see a picture of that person. You read a single line written somewhere of that person, and something opens up. Some channel of communication is opened up, and that person begins to mold your life thereafter. So, precept, influence, and not only influence, but example. In his personal life, the teacher, the guru, exemplifies the truth of his teaching. Whatever he asks you to do, he has done or he is doing himself. He doesn't have two standards, one for you and one for him. He lives his teaching. And his way of life, his approach, his vision, they all become examples. He does not arrogate to himself a superior position. He does not seek to run your life. He does not ask you to belong to him. In a classic sentence, Sri Aurobindo says, he is a man helping his brothers, a child leading children, a light kindling other lights, a power or presence of God calling other powers and presences to God. That's the teacher. You have always to keep this in mind, particularly in this age where there are too many claimants for the title of the Guru. I have always been asked in most of the meetings in the West, how do you distinguish between a pseudo and a true Guru? Really difficult. But if you are sensitive, if you are conscious, when you are in the presence of a genuine person, spiritual teacher, you feel peace. You feel light. You feel luminous inside. But peace, when instead you feel excitement, you get agitation, euphoria as they call it, you can take it that the inspiration is inferior. A true teacher adds to your harmony, opens up the channels, makes you self-reliant. He doesn't throw you into emotional excitement. That's the third factor. And the fourth is time. He says, in all things there is a cycle of time and a period of divine fulfillment. Time is a factor that we have to take into account. When our effort is highly egoistic, relying upon our own strength, personal, time becomes an enemy. It raises up all kinds of obstructions, challenging you. But when you join your effort to the divine grace, submit your effort which you have of course to do, to the divine grace, and enable both to work from your end, your effort, from the higher end, the divine grace, dependence upon the divine, then time becomes a medium and an instrument. And when you are completely surrendered, when your action is taken up by the divine grace completely, time becomes a friend. Time helps. These are the four aids of which Sri Aurobindo speaks as essential for any meaningful spiritual life. They are called in Sanskrit, of course it won't make much meaning to you, they are called sadhana chatushtaya, fourfold instrument of sadhana. And it is tomorrow we will continue this discussion and enter into the dynamics of the integral yoga which he prescribes or perfects for the practice of his philosophy of life divine. Now I think it is open to questions. Need not be necessarily confined to what we have talked.
But before we...
Yes?
I wonder if you would say more something more about time, because time has such different qualities in different situations.
Yes.
And, it's not a matter of hours and calendar.
No.
It's something different.
Time has a different impact when we are too much centered in ourselves. When we are too self-centered, too much revolving around our own ego, time becomes an opponent. When we subordinate ourselves to a great ideal, a great movement, or become part of a great teaching or a great teacher, then time has a different complexion. It helps. Every day helps. And we begin to feel 24 hours is not enough. When we feel time fleeting, it is a sign of inner progress. When we feel time hanging heavy, it is a sure sign of inertia and some blockage in our consciousness.
You touched on this, but I wonder if you might amplify how can we encourage our aspirations to define
By relating every moment of our life to that aspiration. Many times we live a mechanical life, doing things just that they should be done, that's all. But without reference to our ideal. So if we want to realize the divine, say for instance as peace, we can realize the divine as beauty, as peace, as knowledge, as force, so many ways, or in many ways. So let us, in this American society, it is peace of mind, I believe, that is most required. And once you say that I want to realize the divine as peace, when you meditate, you think of the divine as peace and pray for peace. In your daily life, you have to be careful never to allow a moment within you or outside you which disturbs the peace, which conflicts with what you want. To be impatient is a moment that upsets peace. To get angry, to be afraid, fearful, it disturbs the peace. To treat others harshly, it disturbs that person's peace. So it is not peace in your own being, but peace in your environment. So the whole approach to life, the way in which we live, undergoes a slow change, since it is required to build peace in your life. Peace just doesn't come down from above. We have to be supportive, and in order to have no fear, no anxiety. What's the way? There are only two ways. Either you must be a daredevil who cares for nothing, or have complete trust in God. Complete trust, then you have no fear. You know that nothing can happen to you against the will of God. And if it is the will of God that such a thing should happen, nothing can prevent it. So you make peace and you are not disturbed. So each requirement has its repercussions, consequences in the adjustment of attitudes. You take food, you cook food. Well, even a matter of cooking food, if you think of peace, if you pray for peace at that time, and if you are peaceful, lot of peace enters into the food that you cook. And when you eat, if you are peaceful, you feel that you are eating peace through the food. It does nourish you in peace. So these are small matters. Treatment of children, treatment of friends. If you are peaceful, if you are not disturbed, even if you are insulted, if you are criticized, if you just don't react, well, that tells. That adds something in the cosmic balance. This is what is meant by organizing your life, daily life, around your central aspiration.
In reference to the dichotomy that you spoke of, as they begin to crop up, sometimes it seems that it's easier than other times to have a fuller aspiration. And then suddenly it seems that old habits or old actions start creeping up again.
Yes.
And it does cause a great amount of confusion and sometimes a real struggle. And what's the best way to work with that?
To recognize that we are not of one piece. Human being is a multiple being. So there are many parts in us which just do not want to change. They are prisoners of habits. And certain requirements of spiritual life, like being truthful, being peaceful, not giving upper hand to ego and desire, these are very much resented and opposed by our own unregenerate parts, which come up when we impose that discipline upon them. So it is like educating them, getting their consent, coaxing them, putting your will firmly at certain times. You have to carry your whole being with you, and at times it is difficult, at times it is easy. It is easy when those parts which cooperate are in the front. Difficult when the hidden parts come up, throw you a temptation, and you find it difficult. So each person carries the whole past evolution in oneself. It is an uphill task, but there is in everybody's life what is called the hour of God. The hour of God is the most favorable moment where a certain divine dispensation is in your favor. At that time, a little effort brings out magnificent results. There are times when everything goes wrong, everything goes against you. At that time it is wise not to exert oneself too much. So one must learn where to relax and let things go, and where to expedite your effort by observation. And when things are favorable, it is best to redouble your effort and go ahead. But where things are difficult, better, to wait patiently, not losing faith. In all mystic literature, they speak of day and night. Day is a period of luminous progress. Night is the patch of obscurity when you are held back. You have to endure, you have to bear. We shall not fight with such circumstances in such an unfavorable moment, because we are not just isolated individuals. We live in a universe, we live in a society, and constantly there are universal and collective suggestions, forces, movements coming upon us all the time, and acting in a reverse manner. So where we have to compromise, where we have to balance, where we have to oppose, each person has to find out according to one's capacity, according to one's resources. Yes, you wanted to ask something?
Yes, when we think that action in spiritual life, what is the best way? No, do we have to forget to abandon other ambition or goals of life?
No. You do not need to. Only it must be enlightened by your spiritual aspiration. For instance, there are legitimate ambitions, legitimate desires, and those which are not. When your ambitions or desires are at the cost of somebody else, doing injustice to somebody else, they are unspiritual and they shall not be indulged in. But to try for your own advancement, to earn, to make your home happy, to bring up your children, these are all legitimate duties and they have to be done. But with this background, trust in God, entrust them to the divine will, and you will see things work better. when you don't rely entirely on your own, but invoke a higher help, depend upon a higher consciousness, higher intelligence. And when you do that, when you introduce a spiritual dimension in your life, many things become understandable, easier. Obstructions, of course, are there, because the forces of ignorance, the circumstances of ignorance, which hold you at prisoner now, they are never happy when you want to go beyond. And you always have difficulties. A person content and satisfied with a life of ignorance and falsehood, he won't have much difficulties. But once you try to improve yourself, once you try to rise in your consciousness, there are these difficulties. They are part of the game and they have to be gone through.
When you mention the time flies away quickly, it's a sign of progress, and when
Yeah.
it hangs heavy,
Yeah.
it's lethargic, this
Yeah.
thing. Did you mean is progress, spiritual progress or material progress?
Psychological progress.
Psychological progress.
Yes.
Because here we all have to keep up with such a fast pace.
Yes.
That it's don't feel that we are progressing anymore.
But still, no, it doesn't, even this does not allow tamas to settle in you.
Okay, that's true.
For instance, in the East,
have
we
a-
do things with a leisurely way,
Yeah.
and you will feel lot of tamasic people moving slowly
Yes.
and all that.
That's
That is tamas.
Hmm.
So Sri Aurobindo used to say that there is heavy tamas in the East.
Mhm.
He said if he had poured in Europe that much spiritual energy which he poured in India, it would have caused 3 revolutions. But here it was all absorbed by the tamas of the society.
Yes.
You see. So in the West, whatever you may say anything, the tempo of life
Yes.
is such that there is no tamas. That is why there is more material prosperity
Mhm.
and there is intellectual, fermentation.
Mhm. But as you say, lack of peace of mind.
Yes.
You
That
see,
it is
at
a
the
trick.
cost of something.
It is a trick,
It's a trick.
It is a trick.
Right.
Always nature develops one way. And now the human consciousness has to modify, has to reconcile. Nature goes on developing one-sided developments.
Right. Because when I go to India, I find such a difference, so much peace, and it's so conducive to concentrate or meditate. And
But they don't.
they don't.
We don't meditate, we don't concentrate. No, we don't. We speak of, we
that's
just
true.
utilize the time for
The majority of
easy
people
going, That is why we are not advancing. You see.
I saw just 2 movies in Channel 9 from India, Indian movies.
Uh-huh.
I see.
And they didn't seem to concentrate or meditate. Or
No, they don't. They don't.
Still,
Yes.
See, there are all types. India is everything. So that's also there too.
But India's economic conditions and social conditions are such
Hmm.
that the new type of spiritual life can be built more easily in a country like here,
Yeah.
where the material things are there. You don't have to spend too much time in your gadgets, your time-saving things. You get time to think, you get time to study. A housewife in India, from morning to evening, she is busy with the kitchen and the children, We have no time. Here I go to any house and I see every housewife reads books, she has library, she has time to think. And this is a blessing of modern civilization which people here don't realize, you see. No. Technology is a development of consciousness and we must make the right use of it. We must not allow it to drive us. We
That's
must
the
use
trick.
it. And to do that, we have to have a higher spiritual and moral authority. So that is why there is so much of opening to the Eastern spirituality in the West. A time has come when technology calls for the right direction.
Sure, Pandit, don't you think that perhaps part of that also may be that with so much material, thinking maybe that was the goal, to have so much material possessions, and then having so much and realizing that
Yeah.
no peace is attained through that, too. Don't you think that was
It was a necessary phase. This is not the end, but it is a necessary phase. Because you have had all these things, and you have realized the emptiness of having it solely, that some gap is there, you are thinking of other dimensions. In the East, whole of East, there is so much of economic poverty, depression, social backwardness, that they can't think of these higher things. All their time and energy is spent in making up the leeway. It will take another 25 years before they can come into their own. It is a product of history. After all, this society is 300 years old or 250. They are 25 centuries old. You see, there is a curve up and down, and now they are rising. They are coming up. They are coming up. Yes.
In some occult literature, they talk about Atlantis as a society very highly developed
Yes.
scientifically
Yes.
and into magic, which is science. And they were destroyed because somehow they lost touch with forces of life, and they went too far dealing with forces of death. And some places they mention that something like that is happening now. I mean, I'd like to ask, isn't it possible that we are on the verge of that we are reading the final judgment? I mean, the verge of another fall in another, but on which technology, for instance, 30% of the scientific and technological establishment in America works for military purposes. And it's a very heavy commitment with death. And when Sri Aurobindo talks about technology or the progress of the West in a way that says that this is a necessary stage, a necessary period, I remember Vivekananda in one of his books, he says that 200 years is not enough time to judge the Western way as a better way than the Eastern way. And I could hear in the back of my mind he say, it's not enough time to judge the Western adventure. And then I wonder, is it that clear in Aurobindo's writings and conception that the whole world should embark on the same trip of the West? I mean, economic and technological development for India, for Bangladesh, Brazil, the whole Africa, and all of that. And we know that for China to have the same standard of living of America, we would need more 3 or 4 Earths, planet Earths, to have the resources for that. And is that an established notion in Aurobindo's writing that all that is necessary, or we're going to have a clean relationship with technology, and we're going to have some enlightened people handling the whole technical bureaucracy, and then it's going to work fine for the material needs of everybody, so that the masses can apply themselves on the spiritual path?
Well, there are many questions in your statement. First is about the continents of Atlantis, Lemuria and similar places. You have to make a distinction between the spiritual and the occult. Spiritual relates to your inner consciousness and with the reality. Occult is knowledge of the processes of nature. The physical science today knows only the processes of physical nature, but occult science knows the processes of secret nature. Physical nature is only the outermost phase, but there is a mental nature, there is a vital nature, there is deeper nature, and that is called occult. Occult is the knowledge and practice of the secret processes of nature which are not visible. If I can make you have the same thought which I have at this moment, well, that is an occult process. If I can make you take out your fountain pen and give it to him without my telling you, that is an occult process. Now this knowledge is called occult knowledge, and in all older societies, spirituality, occultism was developing more than mental sciences like philosophies or economics or history, because those people had not yet developed the rational mental intellect. Old Greece, Egypt, their mysteries and rituals and things like that, old India, they all developed. But these countries, like India, they always gave more importance to spiritual development and gave secondary status to occult knowledge. They said occult knowledge without spiritual consciousness to guide it is dangerous. But they also accepted that mere spiritual knowledge without the knowledge of processes to effectuate that knowledge is important. So both are necessary. Now in countries like Atlantis and Lemuria, they somehow ignore the side of consciousness, spiritual, and went on developing the occult side. And they achieved results which are really beyond the conception of modern technology. If I just sit here and I want a person 10,000 miles away to answer me, I can do it occultly. But technology, they need a telephone here and a telephone there, an instrument. So it is, what happened was, it developed and developed so much occult knowledge, occult practices, that it became lopsided. And the tradition is they were lost in the floods or whatever. Actually, it turned into suicide. Just as there is the danger of material technology committing suicide today, there the danger took place, and those continents were wiped out. Those societies are wiped out. Now here, the difference is so much that thousands of years have elapsed, and human consciousness is more mature, more developed. All our crisis is simply due to this, that man has erected a huge machine of technology, but his consciousness has not developed on par with that technological development. He can't handle it, he is afraid of it. But he realizes the need to do it. That's the saving feature. A need to develop consciousness, a need to develop the missing dimension, and that gives you authority and direction to use technology. And as far the danger of things exploding, we believe that God has use for man. We have faith in the divine, and the divine is not going to allow this huge civilization to be just blown into smithereens and start the experiment all over again. No. This brinkmanship is there everywhere, but somehow things will be contained, and according to our approach and experience, a third world war is not going to come. There will be bloodlettings in local battles and things like that. But within 20 years you will see the face of the earth beginning to change. And Sri Aurobindo does consider material development, material progress as important as spiritual progress to humanity. Both are necessary. But you should not confuse America with the West. America is a country which has come yesterday. It is only a part, but Europe is there, and countries influenced by Europe are there. They are really the West. America is the latest, youngest country of the West. So what he means, he doesn't have American technology in his mind when he speaks, but the Western science and what science has developed, reducing pain, reducing suffering, elongating life, giving man, freeing man from drudgery, all these plus points he thinks. And we should be sensible enough to keep the negative things under control. And after all, nobody wants American technology outside. Neither South America, nor Africa, nor Asia. We just don't want it because it will throw millions of our people on the streets. So people like Shoemaker from England, they said we want appropriate technology. Western technology will not do for third world countries. It will upset the entire balance. So just temper technology, temper to the needs and the moods and the ways of those people, different in Africa, different in India, and now they are fashioning a different type of technology to work in so that they become part of our life and not masters of our life. In India, what we want today are not these huge things, structures and machines. No, we want smaller things which can work in villages, which can work in small areas. Your tractors are there. They can, work 700 acres, 800 acres, 5,000 acres, huge tractors. But in India, our holdings are 50 acres, 60 acres, 70 acres. What are we going to do with these tractors? They were sent. Now what will they do? Who is going to operate? And where are the lands? We want smaller tractors. And one tractor is expensive, all right. We have a tractor in one place and other farmers borrow it and use it. So this is called appropriate technology. In South America, on some country, I think I read somewhere that some of these multinational corporations, sugar plantations, they brought some machine which would have done the work of 5,000 people with a core of 50. There was a great uproar, and that company had to withdraw that machinery and allow the work to go on those primitive lines. These are our complicated questions. And some things are overblown, even in technology, overblown. But these are inevitable. Just as in spiritual dimensions also there have been exaggerations, renunciations, cancelling oneself. Similarly, in the material progress there have been exaggerations. I suppose that is human. As long as we are ignorant, we are bound to do that. Think we should disperse now. We'll meet tomorrow.